Penelope Gray tugged her plain cloth bag closer to her side as she stepped onto the polished marble floor of the Grand Crescent Hotel lobby. Her thrift store dress, faded and patched from years of wear, contrasted sharply against the gleaming surfaces and sparkling chandeliers overhead. The scent of fresh lilies filled the air, mingling with hushed conversations and the delicate clatter of china from the nearby cafe. Around her, well-dressed guests moved with assured ease, their polished shoes echoing softly in the vast space. For years, Penelope had worked long hours as a maid for a modest cleaning service, her hands worn but steady. She had saved every extra penny from tips, skipped meals, and foregone small treats, all to afford this special stay. It was meant to be a quiet celebration of her late mother's birthday, a moment to honor the woman who had dreamed of luxury but never known it. Now, standing before the front desk, Penelope took a calming breath and stepped forward. With a polite voice that betrayed a hint of nerves, she said, "Excuse me, I was wondering if it might be possible to get a room upgrade. I heard the higher-level rooms have better views and more comfort, since I have some trouble with walking." The hotel manager, Mr. Carrington, raised an eyebrow and let out a loud, dismissive chuckle. "A maid asking for an upgrade? That's rather naive, isn't it? I'm afraid you're out of place here." His words carried across the lobby, drawing the attention of many nearby guests. A wave of whispers and chuckles rippled through the crowd. Penelope's cheeks flushed bright red. The excitement she'd carried here dissolved into a heavy knot of embarrassment and hurt. Surrounded by glances of amusement and indifference, she suddenly felt small, unwelcome in a world she had only hoped to touch. A few nearby guests smirked openly, exchanging whispered remarks that dripped with thinly veiled disdain. "Look at her, thinking she belongs here," one muttered, barely audible but sharp enough to sting. Another guest snickered and nodded, clearly entertained by Mr. Carrington's rebuke. Yet not all shared their amusement. Some averted their eyes, their faces folding into expressions of discomfort and regret. The tension hung in the air like an unwelcome guest, thick and suffocating. Penelope swallowed hard, the image of the pristine lobby blurring behind her tears. She didn't say a word, didn't protest or explain. Instead, she quietly turned and pushed open the gilded glass doors. The cool air outside felt sharp against her flushed skin. She pulled her cardigan tighter around her shoulders and shuffled down the steps, trying to steady a staggering mix of emotions: shock, disappointment, humiliation. A cold breeze brushed her cheek as she walked away from the hotel's polished splendor. She reached a nearby bench beside a quaint fountain tucked in the hotel's ornamental garden. The faint sound of trickling water couldn't drown the heavy silence weighing on her chest. She sat down, bowed her head, and let the tears fall without restraint. Her hands trembled as she wiped them hurriedly on her sleeve, but the sting persisted, ever raw. In the stillness, memories came rushing like waves. Penelope remembered the endless shifts cleaning rooms that no one else wanted to touch, the early mornings when her limbs ached but she forced herself out of bed. She thought of the meager meals she skipped, scarfing down a dry sandwich in the back of a dusty closet to save money. She recalled the bills she'd faithfully helped pay when her mother's health had taken a sudden turn for the worse, choosing to send money home instead of buying a new pair of shoes or even a fresh dress. Each sacrifice had built a quiet scaffolding of hope in her life. This trip to the Grand Crescent wasn't some frivolous whim. It was a thread connecting her to her mother, who had dreamed of staying in a hotel like this one, a place where elegance wasn't a rarity, where the scent in the air wasn't stale or faint but alive and welcoming. Years ago, her mother had whispered in faint, raspy breaths, "One day you'll walk through those doors, Penelope. One day you'll see the world through different windows." Penelope's mother had been a fragile woman, her body weakened by illness but her spirit fierce. She had encouraged Penelope to believe in better days, in small joys that could bloom even in hardship. Penelope had carried that resolve through the darkest nights, through the quiet despair of worn-out shoes and empty cupboards. The hotel manager's harsh words fell like a cruel shadow over those cherished hopes. What was meant to be a healing moment, a tribute masked in soft linens and warm lights, had cracked under the weight of scorn. Penelope felt the contrast sharply, her own quiet endurance, and the swift dismissal by a man who saw her only as a servant, not a dignified human being with dreams and struggles. A gust of wind rustled the leaves beside her, pulling her back to the present. She pressed her eyes shut, inhaling deeply, willing the bitterness to pass. The hurt was raw, layered with the sting of judgment from a sophisticated crowd that saw her as less than. Yet beneath that hurt lingered something else, a slow, steady flicker of resilience. She thought again of the little joys she'd given up. The rare lunch with a friend, the small treat of a candy bar after a long day, the promise she had made, this was her moment. And despite everything, Penelope didn't want to lose it entirely. She whispered a quiet promise to herself, this isn't the end. Hours slipped by in the garden's quiet embrace. Penelope stayed seated against the backdrop of gentle water and rustling leaves, her heartbeat gradually settling from turmoil to quiet strength. The sting of humiliation lingered, but beneath it, a delicate thread of resolve began to weave through her thoughts. She remembered how, when her mother had grown too weak to speak, she had insisted on teaching Penelope to keep her head high, to never let the world's judgments define her worth. Penelope clung to those lessons now more than ever. As dusk began to dim the sky, casting faint pink and purple hues across the path, Penelope rose. She smoothed her dress, set her bag firmly on her shoulder, and took a final, steadying breath. Her dream may have been interrupted, but the journey was far from over. She stepped away from the bench and the hotel's imposing facade, her pace measured but resolute. Though the night air was cool against her skin, something warmer kindled inside her, a quiet determination to hold on to her dignity, come what may. The flicker of hope in her chest was faint but unyielding. And with that, Penelope turned toward the rhythm of everyday life, prepared to face whatever came next. Penelope moved away from the fountain's gentle splashing and the imposing facade of the Grand Crescent Hotel, her footsteps steady but slow along the cobblestone sidewalk. The chill of the evening seeped through her thin cardigan, but she barely noticed. Her mind was caught between fragments of the day's harsh encounter and the memory of her mother's unwavering belief in brighter days. The city noises softened around her, distant honks, murmurs of conversations, and the faint hum of a bus idling nearby. Her plan was to find the bus stop a few blocks away and then return to her small apartment where she could safely gather herself. However, as she walked past the side of the hotel, an odd sensation nudged her attention. Drawn by curiosity or perhaps instinct, she veered slightly and noticed a narrow alley between the hotel's service wing and the adjacent building. The alley was dimly lit, shadowed by tall brick walls that bore years of grime and chipped paint. At its far end, a heavy metal fire exit door caught her eye. It was rusted in places, its once bright red paint peeling and flaking. The door was tightly secured with thick chains and a padlock, the metal gleaming ominously even in the fading light. Penelope's brow furrowed. Fire exits were meant to be accessible, life-saving passageways designed for emergencies. A shuttered, padlocked door was a glaring safety concern. Curious and concerned, she lingered nearby, in earshot of a pair of hotel staff who had gathered near an employee entrance. Their voices were low, but as Penelope listened carefully, she caught a snippet of their conversation. "Boss doesn't even care if it's all against code. Said it's been like this forever. No point in fixing what ain't broken," one worker said, voice tinged with cynicism. "Yeah, fire safety? More like fire hazard. If something happened, we'd all be toast before help showed up," the other replied with a nervous laugh. The casual disregard unsettled Penelope deeply. The disregard for worker safety mirrored the disrespect she had faced moments before, but this danger was far more tangible. She couldn't turn away. Still standing at the edge of the alley, Penelope took out her phone and opened the city fire inspector's app she had downloaded long ago, after a training session at work about safety awareness. Her fingers trembled slightly but moved with determination. She filled out the report, describing the locked fire exit, the visible decay of the door and the chains, and included photos she'd quickly snapped. After submitting the report, she pocketed her phone and took a deep breath, thinking she'd done her small part. As she turned to leave, the scuffed soles of her shoes brushed against a small pile of boxes stacked haphazardly near another door marked "Employees Only." She paused, noticing the faint smell of cleaning chemicals lingering in the air. Suddenly, she overheard a fragment of conversation from behind a slightly ajar door down the hall inside the hotel's service corridor. A voice, tired and raspy, was speaking quietly but with frustration. "I'm telling you, handling those chemicals all day in that basement is killing us. The ventilation is awful, and some of us keep coughing all night. But management won't listen." Penelope's heart sank at the admission. No wonder the staff looked tired and worn the few times she glimpsed them during her brief visit. The physical toll of their environment was something she hadn't seen before, and it mirrored the neglect within the posh hotel itself. Back outside, the evening had deepened, and the streetlights flickered on one by one, casting pools of warm gold across the pavement. Penelope felt a mingling of emotions: disgust at the hotel's hidden corners, empathy for the workers trapped in unsafe conditions, and a resolute belief that no one's safety or dignity should be ignored. She wasn't a reporter or an activist, but she had a voice, and that voice deserved to be heard. Later that night, sitting in the bleak light of her small kitchen, Penelope opened her laptop and drafted an email to a local investigative journalist she had admired for years. She composed a straightforward message, detailing her experience at the Grand Crescent, the locked fire exit, and the hazardous conditions for the workers in the basement. She attached the photos she had taken and included a note about the broader culture of neglect she had witnessed. Sending the email felt like a spark against the darkness, a small act of defiance, a refusal to accept cruelty and danger silently. Penelope leaned back in her chair, exhausted but quietly certain that even the simplest voices could begin to shift things, even if just by a little. Tonight was not the end of her story, it was a beginning forged from courage amid hardship. Her mother's words echoed softly in her mind: "One day you'll walk through different doors, Penelope. And when you do, you must never let fear keep you silent." The following morning brought a flurry of activity that rippled far beyond the quiet life Penelope had known. The local journalist, Elena Torres, who had received Penelope's detailed email late the night before, was quick to investigate. Using the photos and the eyewitness account, Elena published a gripping article highlighting the locked fire exit and unsafe chemical storage at the Grand Crescent Hotel. The story spread rapidly across social media platforms, igniting a wave of outrage under the hashtag #SafetyForAll. Within hours, hundreds of comments poured in from people sharing their own stories of mistreatment or safety hazards at luxury hotels across the city and beyond. Some spoke of poor working conditions hidden behind opulent facades. Others commended Penelope's bravery for bringing these issues to light. The post was shared thousands of times, drawing the attention of city officials and public safety advocates alike. Caught in the whirlwind of public scrutiny, the Grand Crescent Hotel's management issued a carefully worded statement. "We take all safety concerns seriously and are conducting internal reviews to ensure compliance with all regulations," said the statement, carefully avoiding direct acknowledgement of any wrongdoing. They pledged to work closely with local authorities, yet the tone lacked the sincerity many in the public craved. City building inspectors didn't wait an inch of goodwill. By the end of the day, a surprise inspection was announced. Officials arrived swiftly, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning every corridor and emergency exit they could access. Their thorough investigation uncovered a litany of violations: emergency exits blocked or padlocked, outdated fire extinguishers, and the hotel's chemical storage room clumsily shoveled into a poorly ventilated basement, exactly as Penelope had reported. The inspection led to significant fines and a temporary suspension of parts of the hotel's operations. Signage warning of fire code violations went up in staff areas, and management was ordered to implement an immediate overhaul of safety protocols. For many workers, this was the first sign that their grievances were finally being acknowledged. Meanwhile, Mr. Carrington, the hotel manager who had publicly humiliated Penelope, faced the consequences. Following a review by the hotel's board, he was suspended pending further disciplinary action. Staff who once whispered about his arrogance and dismissiveness watched as one of their harshest critics was finally called to account. Word of the scandal and Penelope's role touched hearts and ignited conversations far beyond the hotel's marble walls. Strangers from different communities sent messages of support directly to her phone and email. Fellow service workers, some who had endured similar dismissals and exclusion, began coming forward, sharing their own stories of feeling unseen and unheard in settings that should have respected them. Penelope found herself unexpectedly at the center of a growing movement. She had intended only to celebrate a quiet, personal milestone. Instead, her courage had shifted the conversation about dignity and respect in the hospitality industry. Conversations ignited about how the simple workers who keep prestigious places running often bear hidden burdens, physically and emotionally. Despite the media attention and public praise, Penelope remained low-key and calm. She politely declined interviews that felt too intrusive, choosing instead to focus on the everyday practicalities of her life. Her strength was quiet but unmistakable. She was no longer invisible, yet she remained grounded. The story's impact extended beyond Penelope herself. The Grand Crescent Hotel began drafting new policies aimed at improving worker safety and promoting an inclusive environment. Staff meetings acknowledged the need for respect and fairness, and previously unseen employees gained spaces to voice concerns and suggestions. Penelope's single act of refusal to stay silent had sparked a ripple that would carry far, without grand speeches or confrontations, but through simple truth and resilience. At home late one evening, Penelope read messages from people who had felt emboldened by her example. A letter from a cleaning worker in another city spoke of newfound hope. A note from a local council member expressed gratitude for her courage in making the community safer. These messages reminded Penelope that while one incident had been painful and humiliating, it also revealed the power she held quietly all along. The hotel manager's suspension and the city's fines were not a dramatic ending but rather a beginning, a call to continue watching, speaking, and insisting on change. Penelope knew her role was just one part of a larger story. Her dignity, her courage, and her actions had become a pulse in the larger heartbeat of fairness and humanity. She had moved from feeling small and unwelcome to standing as a catalyst for respect without losing her own true self. And amid all the noise and change, Penelope's world slowly started to feel a little kinder, a little more just. In this unexpected chapter of her life, she found what her mother had hoped for, a way to turn hardship into quiet, steady strength. Weeks passed in a blend of routine and subtle transformation for Penelope Gray. The familiar rhythm of early mornings and late shifts at the cleaning service had returned, yet everything felt different. She still dressed in her simple, practical clothes, a modest dress repaired with careful stitches, her plain cloth bag slung over one shoulder, but now she moved with a quiet confidence that had previously eluded her. When she walked down the streets near the Grand Crescent Hotel, she held her head a little higher, eyes steady beneath the gentle weight of dignity reclaimed. One afternoon, as Penelope made her way back from work, she found herself standing across the street from the hotel once more. The gilded glass doors and gleaming marble floors were still the same, but beneath the polished surface, change was simmering. A freshly painted sign hung near the entrance, modest but clear, committed to safety and respect, our guests and employees matter. It was a small gesture, but to Penelope it symbolized something far larger, a promise born from courage and persistence, not from luxury or entitlement. At home, the quiet warmth of her tiny apartment welcomed her after long days. One day, nestled into a corner of her worn kitchen table, Penelope unfolded a crisp envelope bearing the official seal of the city's fire department. Inside was a letter of appreciation, thanking her for her vigilance and bravery in reporting the fire safety hazard. The words were simple but profound. By speaking up, she had potentially saved lives and helped improve conditions for countless others. She folded the letter carefully and pressed it to her chest, her eyes glistening with a mixture of pride and humility. The Grand Crescent Hotel, recognizing the storm its neglect had ignited, sent an official apology addressed to Penelope. The letter expressed regret over the distress she had experienced and outlined the steps being taken to improve safety and treatment of staff. Penelope read it with calm acceptance. There was no need for further confrontation. She carried no bitterness, her focus remained firmly on her own dignity and the future she was steadily building. On a bright Saturday afternoon, Penelope met up with a small group of close friends at their favorite local cafe. The air was light and easy, laughter flowed freely over shared slices of pie and steaming cups of tea. She felt the joy of simple pleasures, those moments of connection and warmth that had long been her strength. As conversation drifted to recent events, friends praised her courage, but Penelope brushed it off with a smile, insisting that anyone in her place would have done the same. Her life did not transform overnight, but the subtle shifts were unmistakable. The pride in standing up for herself and others radiated from within, reflected in the grace with which she navigated both work and community. No longer just a maid defined by simple means, Penelope was a woman who had reclaimed her narrative and earned genuine respect through action and integrity. Walking past the hotel that day, she paused briefly, taking in the new sign once more. The words carried a weight that stretched beyond marketing, echoes of accountability, care, and a commitment to change. She allowed herself a quiet smile before continuing on her way, the soft click of her shoes steady and sure on the pavement. Back in her modest apartment later that evening, Penelope settled into her favorite chair, a warm cup of chamomile tea in hand. The glow from the small lamp cast gentle shadows, creating a comfort that had been hard-earned. For a moment, she reflected on how far she had come, from the sting of public humiliation to the quiet strength of standing tall in her own truth. She didn't need status or approval from the glittering world she once entered so nervously. What mattered was the courage to be her authentic self, the integrity to demand respect, and the resilience to make her voice heard even when the odds were stacked against her. Penelope Gray was no longer simply the modest maid who had walked through the Grand Crescent's doors. She was a woman who had sparked a ripple of change, one that began with a simple act of bravery and grew into a quiet revolution of dignity. And in the peaceful cadence of everyday life, that was more than enough.